A night with a millionaire left her pregnant with triplets and a love she never expected. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. Alara Winter looked at herself in the big bathroom mirror of the fancy St. Regis Hotel in New York. Her fingers shook a little as she smoothed down her dark blue silky dress. It was new and shiny, and she had spent a lot of money on it. The soft fabric felt strange against her skin. She was used to wearing her white chef's uniform in her little kitchen, where she made yummy food for people. But here, she felt nervous and out of place. "Come on, stop thinking so much and get out here," her best friend Sarah Wu called from outside. Sarah always sounded so sure of herself, and Alara wished she could be like that. "The big fancy party isn't going to wait for you forever." Alara took a deep breath and touched the gold necklace her grandma had given her before she passed away. "Just 1 minute," she called back. But her reflection in the mirror still looked unsure. She was only 29, and she had worked really hard to build her cooking business, Sweet and Savory Events. She had started with nothing but her grandma's old cookbook and a big dream. And yet, standing in this fancy bathroom felt scarier than starting her business had been. When she finally walked out, Sarah was waiting, wearing a bright red dress that probably cost more than Alara's whole house rent. Sarah looked at her and smiled. "Wow, now that's what I'm talking about. You look amazing for someone who spends all day covered in flour." Alara laughed. "Thanks, I think? That's kind of a compliment, right?" But inside, her tummy felt like it was flipping over and over. "Remind me again why I let you bring me here?" Sarah's eyes sparkled. "Because you've spent 3 years working super hard, and you never enjoy your success. Plus," she added, linking her arm with Alara's, "as your best friend and favorite food critic, I'm tired of watching you spend all your time in the kitchen. You need to have some fun too." They took the elevator down to the big ballroom. It felt like stepping into a magical world. Beautiful lights hung from the ceiling, making the whole place glow. The floor was shiny marble, and big golden-framed mirrors were everywhere. Fancy rich people stood around, laughing and talking, wearing super expensive clothes. "I don't belong here," Alara whispered, holding her small purse tightly. "Of course you do." Sarah handed her a glass of bubbly champagne. "Your cooking business is getting famous. You were even in a big food magazine. You belong here just like everyone else. And who knows? Maybe you'll meet someone interesting tonight." Alara took a small sip of the drink and rolled her eyes. "I'm not looking for." Her words stopped suddenly. Across the room, she saw a man. He was tall, strong, with dark hair and a sharp jawline. He stood apart from the others, watching everything with deep, serious eyes. Just looking at him made Alara's heartbeat faster. Sarah followed her gaze and whispered, "That's Lucien Vale. He's super rich, started a big tech company, and now he invests in other businesses he's hardly ever seen in public. And," she grinned, "he's always single." "I wasn't asking," Alara said quickly, but she couldn't stop staring. There was something about him that pulled her in, something more than just how handsome he was. As if he could feel her looking, Lucien turned his head. His deep eyes met hers from across the room. The way he looked at her sent a shiver down her spine. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just stared like he was trying to figure her out. Then someone walked between them, breaking the moment, and Alara let out a breath she hadn't even realized she was holding. "I need some air," she muttered, walking away. She stepped onto a balcony that overlooked the bright lights of New York City. The cool October wind helped clear her head, but she couldn't stop thinking about Lucien's eyes. They had looked so intense, and maybe even a little lonely. "The view is better out here than inside, isn't it?" a deep voice said behind her. She turned and found Lucien Vale standing in the doorway. Up close, he looked even more handsome. He was so tall she had to tilt her head to see his face. There was something serious about him, but also something gentle. "I needed a break from the crowd," she admitted. He stepped beside her, leaning against the railing. He smelled really nice, like wood and citrus. I understand. Big events like this can be too much. Everyone in there is trying to impress someone. Alara smiled a little. And how do you know I'm not trying to impress you? Lucian actually smiled at that, and it made him look different. Softer, almost boyish. Because you're the first person tonight to just say what's on your mind. He held out his hand. Lucian Val. She shook it, feeling a tiny spark when their hands touched. Alara Winter. His eyebrows lifted. The chef? I read about your special dinner events, mixing southern food with fancy science cooking. That's impressive. Alara's eyes widened. You read food reviews? I read about things that interest me, he said, his deep eyes locking onto hers again. And you interest me. Inside, the orchestra started playing a slow song. Lucian tilted his head slightly. Would you like to dance, Alara Winter? She should say no. She should go back inside and avoid this dangerous feeling. But instead, she found herself nodding. One dance turned into 2, then 3, then 5. Alara lost count. She felt like she was in a dream, moving with Lucian across the dance floor. His hand was warm on her waist, his touch both firm and gentle. You're a good dancer, she said, a little breathless. Did you take lessons? My mother made me, he said, his voice quiet. She had very strict ideas about how I should act. Alara saw something sad in his eyes. She wished she hadn't asked. I learned from YouTube, she admitted with a small laugh. Kept bumping into my coffee table. Lucian's smile softened. Smart woman, your grandmother. She must have been amazing. Alara nodded. She raised me after my parents passed away. She taught me everything about cooking and life. Lucian's hand slid into hers. She must have been proud of you. Before she could answer, Sarah appeared. I'm heading out. You okay, Sav? Lucian's deep voice answered before Alara could. I'll make sure she gets home safely. After Sarah left, Alara and Lucian found themselves back on the balcony. This time, the city lights felt brighter, the air warmer. I have a confession, Lucian said softly. I knew who you were before tonight. I've been following your career for months. Alara turned to face him. Why? Because you fascinate me, he whispered. He reached up, his thumb brushing lightly against her lip. A strong woman who built her dream from nothing, who refuses to give up or change for anyone. That's rare. Her heart pounded. Lucian, come to my suite, he said. Let's have a drink. Talk. She knew she should say no, but her heartbeat was so loud and his deep eyes were so intense. Just a drink? She asked. Lucian's smile held both a promise and a challenge. That depends entirely on you. The elevator ride to his big apartment was very quiet. Alara felt nervous. Every time his arm touched hers, it felt like little sparks were dancing on her skin. When the doors opened right into his home, she barely had time to see the beautiful view of Central Park before he kissed her. The kiss was everything she dreamed about, but also completely different. He was hungry for her, but also gentle. It made her heart hurt in a good way. His hands played with her hair, careful not to mess it up, while her hands grabbed onto his fancy jacket. When they finally stopped kissing, both were breathing hard. Lucian rested his forehead against hers. Tell me to stop, he whispered. Tell me this is a mistake. Instead of answering, Alara kissed him again. She put everything she couldn't say into that kiss. Maybe this wasn't a good idea. She had her own business, her own life, and she liked being in control. But for once, she wanted to let go, to fall and believe that something good would catch her. That night was full of moments she would never forget. The soft feel of her dress sliding to the floor, the way Lucian gasped when he saw her, the warmth of his skin against hers. Every touch, every kiss felt like something meant to happen, but also a big surprise, like remembering something she never knew she had forgotten. Hours later, when the first morning light came through the window, Alara lay beside Lucian in his bed. She drew small circles on his chest with her fingers, listening to his heartbeat. She already knew she would miss him. "What happens now?" she asked, not sure if she wanted to hear the answer. He took her hand and kissed it. "Now," he said, "we agree that this was amazing, but it probably shouldn't happen again. My life is complicated, and you deserve more than that." His words hurt, even though she knew this was only for one night. Still, she respected his honesty. "Right," she said, sitting up and wrapping the sheet around herself. What heck, just one perfect night. Alara. The way he said her name made her stop putting on her clothes. When she looked back at him, she saw something soft in his eyes. "I won't forget this. Or you." She smiled, though her heart felt heavy. "Neither will I." Later in a taxi, Alara told herself that this was for the best. She had her business, her dreams. She didn't need the distraction of a man who had made it clear he wasn't looking for more. But as she touched her lips, still feeling his kisses, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in her life. Something big. Weeks later, Alara stood in her bathroom, staring at the 3 pregnancy tests on the counter. Each one showed the same result. She gripped the sink tightly, her knuckles turning white. 2 months had passed since that night at the hotel. She had kept busy, trying not to think about Lucien or how he made her feel. But now she couldn't ignore it anymore. "This can't be happening," she whispered to her reflection. But the sickness she felt every morning told her it was very real. Her phone buzzed. Another message from her best friend, Sarah, asking why she kept canceling their brunch plans. How could she explain that the smell of food, her passion in life, now made her feel sick? Her phone rang. It was Dr. Regina Martinez, her new doctor. Alara's hands shook as she answered. "Miss Winter, I have your ultrasound results," the doctor said in a calm voice. "You might want to sit down." Alara sat on the edge of the bathtub, her legs feeling weak. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong exactly," the doctor said, "but we've detected multiple heartbeats. You're carrying triplets." The world tilted. "I'm sorry. What?" "3 babies, Miss Winter, all looking healthy for now. Since a high-risk pregnancy, I'd like to see you again next week." Alara barely heard the rest. She looked down at her flat stomach, trying to believe that 3 tiny babies were growing inside her. A knock on the door made her jump. "Alara?" Sarah called. "I know you're in there. I brought your favorite soup." Alara opened the door. Sarah stood there holding a paper bag, but the smell made Alara's stomach turn. She must have looked pale because Sarah's face changed from annoyed to worried. "Okay, what's wrong? You look like you saw a ghost. And since when do you turn down food?" "I'm pregnant," Alara blurted out, "with triplets." Sarah dropped the bag. Soup splattered on the floor, but neither of them cared. "Triplets?" Sarah's eyes were huge. "From that night with Lucien?" Alara sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. "What am I going to do?" Sarah sat beside her and put an arm around her. "First, we breathe. Then, you tell me everything the doctor said. And at some point, you have to tell him." "Tell him?" Panic filled Alara's chest. "He made it clear that night was a one-time thing. His life is too complicated." "Well, it's about to get even more complicated," Sarah said. "He has a right to know, Alara, and you have a right to his support." "I don't need his money," Alara said quickly. "This isn't about pride," Sarah said. "This is about 3 babies who deserve to know their father, and you deserve help." Sarah grabbed Alara's phone. "Do you have his number?" "No," Alara admitted, "but I know where his office is. Vale Ventures is in that new building on Madison Avenue." "Perfect. We'll go there tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" "I can't just walk into his office and tell him I'm having his triplets. I need time to process this." Sarah took Alara's hands. "Honey, you love making plans, but sometimes life doesn't let you plan." That night, Alara stood by her kitchen window, looking at the city lights. She put a hand on her stomach. "I wish you were here, Grandma," she whispered. "I need your advice." She remembered something her grandma used to say. Life's biggest blessings often look like big problems at first. The next day, Alara tried to focus on work, but when she reached for her chef's jacket, another wave of nausea hit her. "Chef?" her assistant called. "The supplier wants to confirm the wedding order." Alara closed her eyes. How was she supposed to run a busy business while carrying 3 babies? Her phone buzzed, a news alert. The name Lucien Vale made her heart stop. Tech billionaire Lucien Vale faces a hostile takeover. The article showed a picture of him leaving his office. He still looked strong, but there was something tired in his face. Maybe this wasn't the best time to tell him, but maybe there would never be a perfect time. Taking a deep breath, Alara made a decision. No more delays. Tomorrow she would go to his office. The next day she walked into the tall, shiny Vale Ventures building. "Do you have an appointment?" the receptionist asked. "No," Alara said, standing tall. "But please tell him Alara Winter is here. It's important." The receptionist hesitated, then made a call. "You can wait in the conference room, and Mr. Val will be with you soon." As Alara paced, the door finally opened. She turned to see Lucien, and suddenly all the words she had practiced disappeared. Lucien looked different in the daylight. He seemed tougher, not as warm as she remembered. He wore a perfect suit and his face showed no feelings. But when he saw Alara, something small changed in his eyes, like a tiny crack in a big wall. "Alara," he said her name slowly, like he was testing a thin piece of ice. "This is a surprise. I have to tell you something," Alara said quickly before she got too scared to speak. "And I need you to just listen, please." Lucien looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded and closed the door behind him. "I'm pregnant," Alara said. She watched his face. "With 3 babies, triplets. And before you ask, yes, they are yours. And yes, I'm sure." The room went completely silent. Lucien's face didn't change, but his hands gripped the chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but serious. "Did a doctor check this? Are you sure?" "Of course. I'm sure." Alara felt her anger rise. How could he doubt her? She took ultrasound pictures from her bag and placed them on the table. "I have another doctor's appointment next week. But there is no mistake. 3 heartbeats." Lucien picked up the pictures. For a second, his serious face changed. He looked at the pictures with something soft and almost sad in his eyes. 3, he whispered, more to himself than to her. "I'm not asking for anything," Alara said quickly. "I just thought you should know." That got his attention. His head snapped up. "Not asking for anything? You're carrying my children." "I can take care of this on my own," Alara said. "My business is doing well, and I—" "Absolutely not," Lucien interrupted. His voice was firm. "These babies are part of the Vale family. Do you know what that means?" Alara's face turned red. "I don't care about your money, Lucien." "This isn't about money." Lucien ran a hand through his hair, showing how upset he was. "It's about responsibility and safety. The news will find out sooner or later. And when they do," his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and cursed under his breath. "The business deal?" Alara asked. "I saw the news. Richard Cassian?" Lucien nodded, his face dark. "He's been trying to take my company away from me for months. If he finds out about this..." He looked at Alara, really looked at her for the first time since walking into the room. The timing couldn't be worse. "Oh, I'm so sorry that my pregnancy is a problem for your business," Alara snapped. She grabbed her purse. "I'll leave now." "Wait." His hand caught her arm, gently but firmly. The touch sent a shock through her, just like the night they spent together. "I'm handling this badly," he admitted. "Please, sit down. We need to talk." "Talk rationally?" Alara let out a small, nervous laugh. "There's nothing rational about this. I'm carrying triplets, Lucien. My whole life is changing, and I'm scared. But at least I had a few days to think about it. You need time too. Marry me." The words hung in the air. Alara blinked, sure she had heard wrong. "What?" "It's the logical thing to do," Lucien said. His voice was steady, but his eyes looked stormy. Marriage will protect you and the children from the media. It will help me fight Cassian's takeover. We can show the world we are a strong family. Logical? Alara pulled away from him, her chest filled with anger and pain. You want to marry me to fix your business problems, to protect your company, to protect our children, Lucian corrected her. Think about it, Alara. 3 babies. Do you really want to do this alone? Let me help you. Let me be there for you and them. By treating me like a business deal? She shook her head, backing toward the door. That night, I felt something real between us. But this is just you trying to solve a problem. Alara, I need time, she cut him off, and so do you. Think about what you really want, Lucian. Not what's smart, not what's best for business, what you actually want. She turned to leave. His voice stopped her. I meant what I said that night. I haven't forgotten you. I haven't stopped thinking about you. Her hand shook on the doorknob. Prove it. Then she walked away before he could see her tears. In the elevator, she put a hand on her stomach. She felt so tired. Well, that could have gone better, she whispered to her unborn babies. But at least he knows. Her phone buzzed. A text from her friend Sarah. How did it go? Alara stared at the screen. How could she explain that Lucian Val had just proposed like he was making a business deal? Or that deep down, a small part of her wanted to say yes? As she stepped out of the building, she caught her reflection in the glass. She looked the same as before, but everything had changed. Nothing would ever be the same again. Far above, in his tall glass building, Lucian was still staring at the ultrasound pictures. His carefully controlled world was breaking apart. Lucian never lost control. Ever. It was a rule he lived by. But here he was at 3 a.m. staring at the 3 tiny pictures on his desk. His phone buzzed again. A message from his business board about Richard Cassian's next move. He ignored it. Instead, he opened the background check he had done on Alara. It listed everything about her. Her parents' car accident, her successful catering business. But it didn't tell him why he couldn't stop thinking about the hurt in her eyes. Idiot, he muttered, pouring himself a drink. His assistant called. Mr. Vale, Cassian's people want an emergency meeting tomorrow. They say they have important news. Lucian clenched his jaw. Set it for 9 a.m. Also, find out if Cassian has been talking to any reporters. After hanging up, he looked out the window. The city lights sparkled. Somewhere, Alara was probably asleep. Their babies were growing inside her. The thought made his chest feel strange. He had never wanted to be a father. His own childhood was cold and lonely. But when he held those ultrasound pictures, something inside him changed forever. His phone rang. His lawyer. I have the marriage contract ready, his lawyer said. Are you sure about this? There are other ways. She turned it down. A pause. I see. And is something real what you can give her? The question hit too close. Just be ready. Across town, Alara lay awake. She had a business to run. But how could she do it all with 3 babies on the way? Her phone buzzed. Sarah, have you checked your insurance? Multiple births are expensive. Alara sighed. Lucian had talked about security, but she wouldn't marry for money. She wouldn't give up her dreams. The next morning, she felt dizzy at work. Her chef noticed. Triplets, she admitted. Dios mío, he whispered. Is the father around? It's complicated. It always is, but we've got your back. Her phone buzzed, an email from Lucian. We need to talk, 2 p.m. Your choice. She answered with a location. A small park where she felt strong. She looked at her grandmother's old recipe book. Inside, an old quote read, "The heart has reasons that reason cannot know." Alara touched the words on the paper softly. What would you do, Grandma? She whispered. But there was no answer, only the quiet feeling that whatever happened next would change everything again. Outside, the autumn wind blew, carrying a little bit of winter's cold air. Alara pulled her coat tighter around her. She thought about the tiny babies growing inside her. She had always wanted to be in control. Her whole life she had planned carefully and taken smart risks to build her business. But maybe, just maybe, It was time to learn a new kind of strength, the kind that comes from letting someone else help. If only they were brave enough to offer something real. The park looked different in autumn than she remembered from when she was a child. Golden leaves fell from the trees, covering the ground like a soft blanket. She sat on her grandmother's favorite bench, watching mothers push strollers along the paths. Soon she would be one of them. But not with just one baby, with three. Her hand rested on her stomach as a jogger ran past. She wasn't showing yet, but she could feel her body changing, holding a big secret only she knew. 3 strollers. Lucian's voice made her jump. He stood a few feet away, looking different than usual. He wasn't wearing a fancy suit, just dark jeans and a soft sweater. He looked more human. "We're going to need 3 of everything, aren't we?" His words were simple, but they made something melt in Ilara's heart. She was scared, terrified. Lucian sat beside her, close but not touching. "I stayed up all night reading about having 3 babies at once. The risks, the doctors we should see." He turned to her, his face more open than she had ever seen. "I didn't react well when you told me. I tried to handle it like a business problem, using logic and control." He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up. "But I can't stop thinking about it. These are our children, Ilara. Not a business problem, not something to manage. Our babies." A cool wind blew, carrying the smell of winter. Ilara hugged her coat around herself. She needed time to steady her voice. "And what does that mean to you?" she asked. Lucian pointed at a father teaching his little girl to ride a bike nearby. "It means I want to be there. For everything, the doctor's visits, the first steps, the scraped knees, the bedtime stories." He took a deep breath. "I grew up with parents who saw children as things to manage. I swore I'd never be like that." He looked down. "But when I saw the ultrasound pictures, everything changed. These aren't just ideas or future heirs. They're tiny heartbeats we created together." Tears filled Ilara's eyes. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "I've always been in charge, at work, in my kitchen, but 3 babies at once? I don't know how to do this." "Then let's figure it out together." Lucian's voice was steady. "No contracts, no business plans, just us learning as we go." Children ran past them, laughing. Ilara imagined 3 little ones with Lucian's dark hair and her smile. "Ah. What about your company? The takeover threat?" she asked. Lucian's face darkened. "Cassian's meeting this morning was interesting. He hinted that he knows about the pregnancy." Fear curled in Ilara's stomach. "How?" "He probably has someone watching me, but he doesn't understand something." Lucian turned to her. "Family isn't a weakness. It's not something to hide. It's strength if we're brave enough to embrace it." Ilara raised an eyebrow. "That's pretty deep for a billionaire who likes control." Lucian gave her a boyish grin. "I have my moments." Then he grew serious. "I'm not asking you to marry me. Not today. But I am asking for a chance to prove that what we felt that night wasn't just about champagne or a fancy party. I want to show you that I can be more than business and control." "How?" she asked. "Start small. Have dinner with me tonight. Let's talk. Really talk. No pressure, no contracts, just 2 people trying to figure out how to be parents." He squeezed her hand gently. Ilara remembered her grandmother's words. Sometimes the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards. She looked at their joined hands, realizing how different this felt from yesterday's cold business talk. "I have one condition," she said finally. "Name it." "Dinner will be at my place. I'll cook." Lucian raised an eyebrow. "I need to know if you can handle my world as much as I need to understand yours. Also," she smiled, "my morning sickness is better when I'm the one cooking." "Deal." He helped her stand, still holding her hand. "Though I should warn you, I can't cook." "Somehow that doesn't surprise me," she teased. Then she grew serious. "Lucian, this won't be easy. We barely know each other, and we're about to be responsible for 3 lives." "I know," he said softly, "but maybe that's what makes it special. We'll learn about each other while we learn how to be parents." As they walked out of the park together, Ilara glanced at Lucien. He wasn't just a powerful businessman, he was a man trying to change. A child's ball rolled toward them, and Lucien picked it up, handing it back to a little boy with a warm smile. Watching him, Ilara felt something shift inside her, a tiny spark of hope. "Tonight, then," she said as they reached the park entrance. 7 o'clock. Don't be late." Lucien caught her hand and kissed her knuckles. "I wouldn't dream of it." As Ilara walked to the subway, her steps felt lighter. She was still scared, still uncertain, but for the first time since seeing those two pink lines, she didn't feel alone. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Well, how did it go?" Ilara smiled, resting a hand on her stomach. "Ask me again tomorrow. Tonight I'm making dinner for the father of my children." Ilara's kitchen was her happy place, chopping vegetables, hearing the sizzle of oil, and carefully measuring ingredients. It all helped calm her. She was making her grandmother's special dish. It needed focus, but still gave her time to talk. The smell of chicken, herbs, and chocolate pudding filled her apartment. At exactly 6:58 p.m., the buzzer rang. Lucien stood at her door, holding a bouquet of ranunculus flowers. Not roses or lilies, but her favorite flowers, the ones she had only mentioned once. "You remembered," she said softly. "I remember everything about that night." He looked at her black dress and bare feet. "You look beautiful." Then he smelled the food. "That smells amazing. Come in." She took the flowers and arranged them in a vase, touched that he had remembered. "This place feels like you," he said, looking around at her cozy apartment. His eyes landed on framed recipe cards. "Are those your grandmother's?" "You remembered that too," she said. Lucien moved closer. "I remember everything." The timer dinged, saving her from having to respond. "Make yourself useful," she teased, handing him a corkscrew. "Can you open a bottle of wine?" "I think I can manage." He grinned. As they set the table, Ilara realized something. This felt easy, natural. Lucien took a bite. "This is amazing," he said, genuinely impressed. "I eat at the best restaurants, but this is something special. Food is about more than taste." "Shh," she said. "It's about memories, emotions, and love." Lucien reached for her hand. "Tell me about your parents." Ilara shared how she had always wanted to be a chef, and Lucien talked about how hard it was to be part of his rich and important family. Their food got cold as they spoke, but neither of them cared. Lucien looked at his glass and said, "My father always thought feelings made people weak. He only cared about business. He trusted the wrong person once, and because of that, he lost everything." He sighed. "That's why I don't let people get too close. I thought I was protecting myself." Ilara held his hand. "But now?" He looked at her. "Then I met you. For one night I let myself feel everything, and it scared me." His eyes moved to her stomach. "And now I'm about to be a father to 3 babies. I can't be like my father. I won't let my children feel unloved." Ilara felt her heart race. Before she could say anything, both their phones buzzed. Lucien read the message and frowned. "The news found out about the babies," he said. "Someone told them." Ilara's hands shook as she opened a news article. The headline said, "Billionaire Lucien Vale expecting triplets with unknown chef. One-night stand leads to pregnancy." "I'm so sorry," Lucien said, standing up. "I'll tell my team to fix this. We'll make a statement." "No," Ilara said, surprising herself. "No statements, no PR plans." "But Ilara, they'll dig into your life." "I'll be fine," she said, going to the kitchen. She pulled out the chocolate dessert she had saved. "Sit down, Lucien. We need to talk." He sat, watching her put the dessert on the table. She handed him a spoon. "This won't wait," she said, "and neither will this conversation." Lucien took a bite, closing his eyes because it tasted so good. But Ilara kept talking. "You can't control everything. Not the news, not Cassian, not even these babies. They will come when they want, in their own way." Lucien sighed. "I know that, but no buts." She held his hand. "Remember what you told me in the park? Family is not a weakness. He stared at their hands. I meant it. I want to protect you, all of you. Then be here for us. Don't try to control everything. Just be with us. She squeezed his fingers. The news can say whatever they want. But the truth is, we're figuring this out together. That's what really matters. He looked at her and finally relaxed. Together, he said, testing the word. Then his phone buzzed again. This time he laughed. Cassian's company is having an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. They think this news will hurt my business. Then he smiled. They don't know that in New York, nothing makes rich people happier than a wedding and heirs. Alara tensed. I thought we agreed. We did, he said quickly. No business deals, no arranged marriages. He kissed her hand. But someday, when we're ready, I want to marry you because I love you, not because it's good for business. Alara's heart pounded. Lucian continued, his voice soft. I know it's too soon to say, but I think I could love you, Alara Winter, you and our babies, if you let me try. She looked at their hands. This could go very wrong. But she also thought about what her grandmother once said, life is sweet and bitter together. I think, she said carefully, that I'd like to try too. Later, after Lucian left, Alara stood by her kitchen window. Her phone was full of messages, but she ignored them. She touched her lips where Lucian had kissed her goodbye. Not a passionate kiss, but a soft, sweet one. A promise. Her other hand rested on her stomach. Your daddy is learning, she whispered to her babies, and so am I. 3 days later, the news got even bigger. Reporters crowded outside Alara's restaurant, holding cameras and waiting to see her. Inside, she stood in the kitchen, watching her team work. Her friend and coworker, Orion, walked up with a stack of papers. We have a problem. Another one? Alara asked, rubbing her growing belly. At 4 months, the triplets were making themselves known. Worse, Orion said. We are completely booked for the next 3 months. Everyone in New York wants to eat here. He spread the papers on the counter, and half of them are asking for the Vale Baby Mama's special. Alara groaned. Please tell me that's a joke. I wish, Orion said. It was in the newspaper today. Oh, and the Food Network called. They want you on their celebrity chef show. I'm not a celebrity, she protested. I'm just... Orion raised an eyebrow. You're the unknown chef carrying America's most eligible billionaire's triplets. That makes you a celebrity. Her phone buzzed. It was Lucian. She smiled at the picture on her screen, a moment she had captured when he had fallen asleep while reading baby books. The meeting just ended, he said. Cassian lost. His plan to take over failed. That's great news, she said, but she could tell there was more. Now he's trying to make me look like a careless playboy who got trapped into fatherhood. He wants investors to lose faith in me. Let him try, Alara said. Anyone who sees how much you care about these babies knows the truth. Lucian laughed. Speaking of the babies, I had an idea about the nursery. He paused. Wait, my other line is ringing. It's the contractor for baby-proofing. Go handle it. I have a restaurant to run. She smiled. Dinner at my place tonight? Wouldn't miss it, he said. Then, softly, Alara, I love you. Her heart fluttered. Love you too. After hanging up, she rested a hand on her belly. The babies were moving more now, kicking at the worst moments, like during last week's restaurant review when she had to leave 3 times to throw up. A knock on the door. Chef? Orion called. Your 3 was here. I don't have a 3, she said. You do now. Her friend Sarah walked in holding a magazine. Have you seen this? Alara took it and frowned. The cover read, Baby Billions, the romance shaking Wall Street. There was a picture of her and Lucian the ultrasound appointment. The article was mostly kind, but one line made her heart stop. A close source says Lucian's mother is not happy about his relationship with an unknown chef. Sarah squeezed her hand. You know this is Cassian stirring up trouble. Probably. But it still hurt. She hadn't met Lucian's mother yet. The woman was powerful and cold. Forget her, Sarah said. Focus on what matters, like the fact that you haven't told me the baby's genders yet. Alara smiled. The answer was in an envelope waiting in her bag. She and Lucian would open it tonight. Boy or girl? Or both? She couldn't wait to find out. She touched her belly, wondering if the babies inside could feel how happy she was. When she walked into her apartment, it smelled like fresh flowers. More beautiful flowers were arranged in her grandmother's old vase. Lucian was in the kitchen, carefully chopping vegetables. "You're early," she said, smiling at how focused he looked. "I thought I'd try cooking for you this time," he said, looking up. His eyes softened like they always did when he saw her. "But now I think ordering food would have been a better idea," she laughed. "Just be careful with the knife," she suddenly gasped. Lucian rushed to her side. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" He sounded worried. "Nothing's wrong." She grabbed his hand and placed it on her belly. "I think that was a kick." Lucian's eyes widened with wonder. His face lit up as he felt the tiny movement. They stood there together, their hands resting on her belly, forgetting all about the vegetables. "I've been thinking," he said softly, still touching her belly, "about what you said, about letting go of control and just enjoying life. And I want you to move in with me." She froze for a second, and he quickly continued, "Not because of the news or because it would be easier. I just don't like waking up without you. I want to be here for every kick, every craving, every moment." She looked at him, and then, with a big smile, she said, "Yes." She pulled him down for a kiss. "But I'm keeping my apartment. I still need it for my restaurant and just in case." He held her tighter. "You won't need it, but I understand." He kissed her again, longer this time. Then she remembered something. The envelope. They opened it together, standing in the kitchen with half-chopped vegetables and takeout menus all around them. The moment was messy but perfect, just like their whole relationship. "Ready?" she asked, holding the envelope. He placed his hand over hers. "Ready." She tore it open, and they read the words inside together. Alara laughed, and Lucian let out a surprised breath. Outside, the reporters waited for more news, but right now, they didn't care. This was just for them. "Two girls and a boy," Alara whispered, practicing the words she would say later. She stood in front of the mirror, smoothing her hands over her fancy dress. She was 5 months pregnant, and her belly was already big. Lucian's sister Isolde had sent her this beautiful dress from Paris, and it made her feel graceful. The sound of a key in the door made her turn. Lucian had come home. Isolde's flight just landed. He called out, "She's stopping at her hotel to change, then coming here for dinner." Alara's stomach fluttered, but not just because of the babies. "Are you sure about her? She's not like your mother?" Lucian appeared in the doorway. "Trust me. Isolde was the one who stood up to our mother. She's the reason I survived boarding school." Alara's phone buzzed. It was another news story about Celine Vale, Lucian's mother. She had cut her trip short and was giving interviews about family traditions and good marriages. Lucian took the phone from her hands and set it down. "Hey," he said gently, pulling her close. "None of that matters. What matters is right here." He placed his hand on her belly, and as if knowing, one of the babies kicked. Alara smiled but grew serious. "I just want tonight to be perfect. A real family dinner, like the ones you had with your grandmother." He kissed her forehead. "It will be. Isolde is going to love you, and even more, she's going to love being an aunt." The doorbell rang. Lucian squeezed her hand. "That'll be Sarah and Marlowe. I'll get it while you finish getting ready." Alara heard happy voices in the living room as she put on the last touch of makeup. Sarah's laugh mixed with Marlowe's deep voice as they admired the dinner setup. "Look at you." Marlowe whistled when she walked in. "Glowing and fancy." "The dress is amazing," Sarah added, hugging her. "Very fancy mom look." "It's from Isolde," Alara explained. Just then, the doorbell rang again. The woman who walked in looked just like Lucian, tall, elegant, and confident. But unlike their mother, Isolde had a warm smile and bright energy. "So this is the chef who turned my brother into a human," Isolde said, hugging Alara. The pictures don't do you justice. You're glowing. Alara relaxed as Isolde's warmth filled the room. Thank you for the dress. It's perfect. It's the least I could do for the woman carrying my nieces and nephew, or nephews and niece. She winked. I can't wait to find out. They all moved to the living room for snacks, sharing fun stories. Isolde told funny tales about Lucien's childhood, while Sarah and Marlowe told stories about Alara's cooking disasters. Then Isolde's phone buzzed. Her face fell. Mother's back in the city. She wants to have dinner tomorrow. Lucien frowned. We already have plans. Isolde hesitated. If you keep avoiding her, she'll just show up here. Maybe it's better to meet her first. Alara squeezed Lucien's hand. She's right. We can't hide forever. You don't know what she's like? Lucien said. No, but I know who I am, Alara replied. And I'm not afraid of Celine Vale. She smiled. But first, let's focus on tonight. Dinner is ready. The meal was exactly what Alara wanted. Warm, delicious, and full of love. After they finished eating, Lucien stood up and lifted his glass. Before we reveal the baby's genders, I want to say something, he said, looking at Alara. When I first found out about the pregnancy, I treated it like a problem to solve. But Alara taught me that love isn't about control. It's about building something together. He reached into his pocket. Alara's heart stopped. This isn't a proposal. Not yet. That will come when we're both ready. But this. He pulled out 3 tiny silver necklaces. This is a promise, one for each baby. He continued, the charms are from my grandmother, the only Vale who married for love. And the chains, he looked at Alara, they're made from your grandmother's silver set. Alara's eyes filled with tears. My catering set, but how? Marlowe helped me find them at your apartment. It felt right, combining both of our families. Isolde wiped her eyes. Sarah sniffled. Even Marlowe looked emotional. That's what tonight is about, Lucien said. Not just revealing the genders, but celebrating our family. Alara couldn't hold back anymore. I love you, she whispered, kissing him. Sarah laughed. Save some of that for later. They all gathered around the table, each holding a small box. On 3. 1, 2, 3. They opened them together. 2 pink booties, 1 blue. Everyone cheered, hugged, and cried tears of joy. Later that night, after everyone left, Alara stood by the window holding the tiny silver necklaces. Lucien wrapped his arms around her. Mother will hate that I used grandmother's charms, he murmured. Good thing they're not for her then, Alara said, leaning back against him. They're for our daughters and our son, for the family we're choosing to be. As if agreeing, the babies moved under their hands. The city was full of lights and dreams. Inside their cozy home, Alara felt happy. The party was over and everything was peaceful. But then Lucien's phone buzzed. He looked at the message and froze. Alara read it too. Darling, I have booked a table for tomorrow at Le Berard. Be there at 7 sharp. Your father always said family matters should be talked about over a good meal. Celine. Alara knew tomorrow would be important. It would test everything she and Lucien had built. But tonight, she held her family close. She didn't want to worry. She wanted to enjoy the love in their home. Celine Vale was strong, but she didn't know how strong a mother's love could be, even for babies not born yet. The next evening, the private dining room at Le Berard felt tense. Celine Vale sat like a queen, waiting. Her silver hair was styled neatly. She sipped her wine, watching Alara closely. Even though Alara and Lucien arrived exactly at 7, Celine was already there. She had done this on purpose, a small way to show power. Alara had seen these tricks before in her job as a chef. Celine finally spoke. So you are the chef who has caught my son's attention. She said, chef, in a way that made it sound unimportant. Alara knew she was looking down on her. Mother, Lucien said in a warning voice. He reached for Alara's hand under the table. Celine noticed but ignored it. Don't be upset, darling. I just want to understand, Celine said with a cold smile. It's not every day that a woman does what so many have tried. Usually they only hope for 1 heir, not 3. Lucien stiffened, but Alara squeezed his hand and spoke before he could. Mrs. Vale, I'd love to hear about your own experience. Lucian told me you were quite the star of high society when you married his father. Your father was a college professor, wasn't he? How did the rich and powerful people accept you? For the first time, Celine's smile faltered. She didn't speak right away. Just then, the waiter arrived with their first course, a fancy seafood dish that probably cost more than a week's worth of food in Alara's restaurant. Celine regained her cold attitude. "You've done your research," she said smoothly. "Then you must know that I worked hard to be worthy of the Vale name. I learned good manners, joined the right clubs, and made the right friends." "And were you happy?" Alara asked. Both Lucien and Celine looked surprised. Celine's hand tightened around her wine glass. "Happiness is a luxury for people who have big goals. You will learn that when the children arrive, the Vale name comes with responsibilities." "No," Lucien said firmly. His voice cut through the air. "That's where you're wrong, Mother. I saw you and Father live that way. All rules, no joy. Do you know what I remember most from my childhood? The silence at dinner. You both measured every word, every move, like you were being judged." He turned to Alara, his eyes soft. "I don't want that for our children." Celine waved a hand dismissively. "Of course, we will love the children. Once they are here, we can plan their future properly. The best schools, the right friends." "They're not even born yet," Alara interrupted, her hand resting on her belly. "The babies were kicking tonight. And they're not going to be your second chance, Mrs. Vale." Celine's face turned angry. "How dare you?" "No, how dare you?" Alara leaned in. "You don't know me. You don't know what kind of mother I'll be or what these children will want in life. But I know this. They will be loved for who they are. They will learn that success isn't about money or friends in high places. It's about kindness, happiness, and making a difference." Celine scoffed. Nice words from someone who has never lived in our world. Alara sat up straighter. "I live in reality every day, in my kitchen, in my business, in my choices. And the truth is, your son is a wonderful man who should be loved for himself, not for his last name. These babies deserve their own dreams, not ones forced on them. And you deserve to know them as real people, not projects. If you can accept that, you can be part of their lives." Silence filled the room. Celine stared at Alara, really looking at her for the first time. Then, to everyone's surprise, she laughed. It was a real laugh, making her seem younger. "Well," she set down her wine glass, "I see why you love her, darling. She reminds me of someone." "Who?" Lucien asked, though he already guessed. "Your grandmother, my mother-in-law." Celine smiled softly. "She was the only one who stood up to me like this. She saw past my fancy image and found the scared professor's daughter underneath. She gave me this necklace, you know." She touched the pearls at her neck. "She told me true elegance is about being yourself, not following rules." Alara felt a kick from the babies. She reached for Celine's hand. The older woman was surprised but didn't pull away. Alara placed Celine's hand on her belly. "Oh," Celine gasped as she felt a strong kick. "They're quite active." "The girls especially," Alara said. "Lucien thinks they'll be little firecrackers." "Girls?" Celine's voice wavered. "2 girls and a boy," Lucien confirmed. "We found out yesterday." Celine slowly pulled her hand away. Her face had changed. I may have judged too quickly." She straightened her shoulders. "They'll need a proper nursery. The Hampton house is perfect for summer. And, of course, they should have their own space in the city." "Mother," Lucien interrupted with a smile. "One step at a time." Celine looked almost embarrassed. "Of course. I want to be involved if you'll let me." Alara met Lucien's eyes. He looked hopeful, just like she felt. "We'd like that," she said carefully. "As long as you understand, these children will be raised with love, not pressure." Celine nodded slowly. "I think I'd like to learn that way." She picked up her menu. Her hands shook slightly. "Now, shall we order? The chef here makes excellent sea bass." The rest of dinner was calmer. As they left, Celine hesitated, then hugged Alara. It was awkward but real. Thank you, she whispered, for reminding me what's important. That night in bed, Alara and Lucian talked about the evening. Do you think she really wants to learn? Alara asked. Lucian thought for a moment. I think you gave her something she's been looking for, permission to be real, just like you did for me. Alara turned to him, seeing the love in his eyes. I have something to tell you. I'm ready. For what? He asked. For that perfect proposal you talked about. Lucian's smile lit up the room. I was hoping you'd say that. He pulled a small velvet box from his nightstand. Inside was a vintage ring with 3 small stones. It was my grandmother's, he said. She married for love. I added 2 stones, one for each of our daughters. The middle diamond is for our son. Alara's eyes filled with tears. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. As he slipped the ring on her finger, the babies kicked, celebrating with them. Outside, the city shone. Inside, their future was taking shape, built on love, family, and the courage to be real. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.